2023. Another year has passed and it's another year to rank all the games that I beat this year. This year was full of some of the best games that I've ever played, and I got to enjoy many different experiences. Not all these games came out this year, these just happened to be the ones that I played. There could be minor spoilers here, so just watch out for those. Remember that just because the game is low, doesn't mean that I did not enjoy it. Some games are just better than others, and most of the games on this list are very close to each other. I also put a lot of work into this video, so if you could drop a like and leave a sub, that would be greatly appreciated. Feel free to go in the comments and tell me what you think about this ranking, and what games you guys played this year. Anyways, let's get on to our list. Starting off our list, we have John Wick Hex, and I gotta be honest, I was just disappointed after playing this game. Something about a John Wick game really intrigued me, and the game did for about a chapter and a half. Yet as the game went on and got harder, it began to show its cracks. So to start off, the game ends up getting really hard, and a slow-paced strategy game is not quite right for John Wick. John Wick seems like he better utilized in a game like Severed Steel, but this is just a slow and crappy version of Super Hot. Going from expertly choreographed fights in the films to janky movement felt pretty jarring, and some ideas are smart, but this is a very repetitive and painful experience to get through. Now, just because this game is at the bottom of the list doesn't mean it's bad, just means that the games above it are better. On its own, Battle Block Theater is not too much, just a basic platformer, but it's not about the destination, it's about the friends that we made along the way. This game was a blast with my friend and just messed around with for a while. On the other hand, sometimes we got insanely pissed off at each other when one of us decided to be a little goober. The game does not take itself seriously and tells great jokes as well, basically 2010s humor, but it couldn't be better. I would recommend this to anyone who's just trying to find a fun game to play with your friends, and maybe send a few cheeky death threats along the way. When I first started this game, it seemed like it would just be a basic golf game. However, things quickly took a turn. This game throws endless surprises towards the players, always keeping them on their toes and staying interested. I was always excited to jump into the next level and see what the game would dish out at me next. All of the references were amazing and hit perfectly, except some of the levels needed a bit of quality control. If you're looking for a chill but exciting experience, this game is for you. There is a little basic golf in the game, and the rest is incredibly fun. This is also a very fun game to 100% due to its quick levels and arcade style. Papers, Please is the worst nightmare to someone who is not organized, such as myself. Basically, in the game you take control as a border officer. It starts off simple, let only one country in, yet as the game goes on it gets more and more complex to the point where you just have to remember tons of rules. Mistakes will be made along the way, a lot of mistakes, but in the end, you get one of the game's various endings and see how you did. I wouldn't necessarily consider it fun, but it was a unique experience and a mind melter that I couldn't stop coming back to. Until I got to the 25th day, where it kinda overstayed its welcome and got pretty repetitive. But regardless, it was a really cool game that transported you into its own world, even if that world might not be the best one to live in. Last year I played Tomb Raider, and I thought it was pretty good, so this year I checked out a sequel. It is strikingly similar to the first, the only noticeable changes being the world. But what a stunning world it was. The mountains were definitely a great setting for the game. That being said, it did not improve much and puzzles were still not focused on as much as I thought they should have been. Most of the game does feel stale, with a large bit just being spent in uninteresting Soviet camps and buildings. But when it really shines, it really shines. Another thing I should mention is I played the game around the start of the year and remember almost nothing from it. So it did not do too much to stand out and be memorable. That being said, the tombs were amazing to explore, one of the best aspects of the game. So regardless, it was fun while it lasted. In the last few years, there has been a huge resurgence in Metroidvanias. Some just meld into one another and don't do too much to innovate, whereas some create new ideas and create an amazing world to stand out on their own to be some of the best indie games ever. Dandara is one of those. The main focus of the game is movement. Your movement is restricted, and the only way you can move is by switching your gravity and sticking to walls. It takes a bit to get used to, but when it gets going, it's insanely fun. This game is such a hidden gem, with such a great world to explore and power-ups to get, and the game does a great job at hinting at you that you should not be in an area quite yet. One thing I would say is the game takes a huge difficulty spike near the end, with the final boss being insanely hard and requiring lots and lots of tries. The other bosses were legendary though, and very clever. The only thing holding Dandara back is how they did not expand even further and flesh out everything just that little bit more, as the overall experience was very short. Crash Bandicoot, the classic platformer on the PS1. I don't think many people expected this remake. Before this, Crash was in a weird phase where the only time he appeared was in Skylanders, where he talked in an Australian accent. The original games are janky, so bringing them up to modern standards was a great idea. As far as the games went, 1 was the hardest, 2 was the most balanced, and 3 was the most fun and creative. And congrats to everyone who beat Slippery, Climb, and Future Tense. I was not one of them. There is a crazy amount of content here too, with the time trials you could spend hundreds of hours on. I wouldn't have really known of this game if it wasn't for the remake, so bringing this game to future generations helped me enjoy it too, and stopped Crash from being stuck in the past. I don't play many modern horror games, not because I'm scared, but more so because survival horror is just done way too much, and the same crappy AI following you around for an entire game doesn't seem that enticing to me. However, when I decided to try Alien Isolation, I was blown away at how immersive it really was. The AI is a technical marvel, and is so complex that for the first 10 or so hours, the game is immensely terrifying. But that's just for the first 10 hours. I found near the end it just got more annoying than scary, and I wish the runtime of the game was cut in half to make for more of an all-around amazing experience that doesn't overstay its welcome. To add to the immersion, the game felt like I was literally inside of a movie from the 70s, with the camera having a bit of a fuzzy look to it, and old technology lying around everywhere. The game was definitely inspired by the next game on our list, took many notes from it. Speaking of, BioShock 2 is kind of a weird game in its series. It's often looked at like the middle child, most of the time forgotten about, but I thought it was pretty great. You play as a big daddy this time, which changes the game a lot less than I thought it would, but I think it's funny that they decided to take the worst part of the original BioShock and make it into a full game. One new thing I hated is how you got the little sisters. You have to play a little tower defense minigame, and only like tower defense when it involves monkeys and balloons. Dual wielding weapons and plasmas was a blast, however, and the weapon variety was increased. The levels are a lot more linear, which could be a good or bad thing, but I view it as a pretty good thing. But most of all, there aren't many improvements and it feels like a rehash of the first. Rapture doesn't have the same shock value, and the story is not really that great, but the world is still amazing to explore, and there's a ton of great areas that constantly innovate on themselves. I can't wait to play the next in this series, and see how the series reinvents itself once again. When this game came out, everyone got angry. And I could see why at the time. Something like coming off of this classic Super Mario Galaxy 1 and 2 did seem pretty underwhelming. And while this game might not be just as amazing as those games were, it still provided a wonderful experience to get through. And now that we have Odyssey, it's just really hard not to love this game. It presents itself like a 2D Mario game with shorter levels and flagpoles to get. There are a lot of memorable levels in here with amazing ideas. But on the other hand, there's a bunch of forgettable levels. I would say one main redeeming factor, however, is the multiplayer. Screwing over your friends in 2D is so much fun, but the extra dimension allows for so much more creativity. Another amazing addition to the Switch release is Bowser's Fury, which I would say was a perfect experience through and through, combining the best of Odyssey and 3D World into a nice little package. The best puzzle games take what you know, get you comfortable, tuck you in, read a little bedtime story, and then take that concept and push it to its absolute limits. Take something like Portal, and I am proud to say that Superliminal does exactly that. I never knew what to expect in this game. Every corner you went around has something new to change your perception of what can be done in a game. It starts off with a simple but mind-bending mechanic when you can change the size of objects based on perspective. But as the game goes and goes, it gets more and more crazy. It just kept me on the edge of my seat the entire time. And I do feel like the game was pretty short, feeling like kind of a proof of concept, and I could have done a lot more to build to a proper conclusion. But I would just say, play this game if you want to change how you play games like this, and have your perspective just absolutely cranked to its maximum on all sorts of things. It just really bends your mind. Interesting movement is something that most first-person shooters lack, but you don't realize how much you need it until you play something like Titanfall 2. Another thing they commonly lack that Titanfall does all too well is a fun campaign. Creativity is flourishing in Titanfall 2. My own favorite level is one when you jump around a house while it is being built. But the fan favorite seems to be the one where you can time travel at will. And I haven't even got started on Titan combat, where you control these huge mechs through colossal fights. But when you're not in the Titan, you can have an absolute blast running on walls and hitting sick acrobatics to maneuver around enemies and get the most stylish kills. Anyone who feels a little bit bored with other games, making boring copy and pasted campaigns and boring ass movement, should really try this game. And I haven't even played the multiplayer yet, which I've heard is amazing. Going from the last game, which featured grand fights, we scale it back a bit to Link's Awakening. Link's Awakening takes a nice plasticky look and brings you back to when you were a kid playing with toys. As I did not grow up with the original, I don't have the same nostalgia for it, but I still think it was an amazing game. Having the world completely open instead of screen by screen made it feel really alive. It's probably one of the most unique Zelda games too, with the whole concept which I will not spoil. The dungeons were definitely pretty simple, but some puzzles still managed to stump me, and I did like the short form factor of the game. But the world and all the random little things is where it really shines, like the 2D platforming segments and all the weird Mario enemies in there for some reason. The game is vibrant, and while it appears lighthearted, it gets incredibly dark as you go through the story. All the characters are incredibly charming, and the trading side quests, some of the most fun I've had during a side quest ever. I do however wish the dungeon builder was a bit more fleshed out, and maybe you could carry on the tradition of a new dungeon being added every time they release this game. But those are just extra nitpicks in an otherwise amazing game. It gives us hope that there are more 2D Zelda games on the way. The next 3 games here on the list aim to create a story that rivals cinema. Starting off here, we have Yakuza 0. For anyone not educated on this series, on the surface level, it is a crime game where you follow the Japanese mafia. But it is so much more than that. In the first hour of the game, you go from beating up a man in the alley to a cute little karaoke minigame and getting back to getting framed for murder. To set you on a wild journey full of highs and lows, probably one of the best stories I've ever played. It balances seriousness and comedy amazingly, and some of the cutscenes really feel like you're watching a TV show. No, seriously, they go up to 42 minutes long. On top of the amazing story is its side content. You can run both a real estate business and a cabaret club respectively, and the story is split between 2 characters. The side missions are where the humor of the game really shines. You do truly the most outlandish stuff. There's so much to do here, and I really recommend this to people who just want an amazing story experience and a variety of things to do so you never get bored. Let's do a little history lesson, shall we? Back in 2020, Square Enix made an Avengers game. Superhero games have been picking up a lot lately, so everyone was excited to play as the star team. But to everyone's surprise, the game was absolute trash. So when Square Enix decided to try again with Guardians of the Galaxy, almost nobody played it, and they missed out so much. The characters and story are amazingly written, and they rival their on-screen counterparts. It got to a point where when I watched the third movie in theaters, I thought the characters looked weird due to how much I was used to playing them in-game. The game is also visually stunning. I look like a space tourist with all the pictures I was taking. The game's combat was a little shallow, but the addition of your Guardian abilities and timed moves really helped it shine. While I do respect them focusing on a single-player story, I feel like they could have added into the gameplay by adding drop-in multiplayer, where your friend could take control of a Guardian, without subtracting from the gameplay or story at all. But beggars can't be choosers. If you're a really big Marvel fan, and you really like the movies, including their amazing soundtracks, then you should really not sleep on this game. Red Dead Redemption 2 is a game I'm sure you've heard more than enough praise about, and I can assure you that it is all true. To say that Red Dead Redemption 2 has some of the best stories ever made is an understatement. The story in this game is truly special, and poses some of the best character development ever seen. The game is filled with several memorable moments that'll stay with me to this day. Along with that comes probably the most realistic open world ever made, and one of the prettiest ones in terms of natural beauty through its varied landscape. Speaking of realism, everything in this game is done as realistic as possible. It's kind of a double-edged sword. On one hand, it makes the game insanely immersive, but on the other hand, it takes forever to do something as much as a little task. The other main complaint I have is the mission structure. It sacrifices freedom for a story, and missions are very restrictive. You're required to do exactly what they want you to do, and everything just evolves into a shooting gallery, and it really wears on you near the end. But it's really easy to overlook that aspect when you play the game that does everything else nearly perfect. Our last game featured an amazing open world and an amazing story, but the one thing it suffered from was freedom during the story. And Tears of the Kingdom serves to all that and bring the most freedom I've ever seen in a game. You may think, how could they possibly top Breath of the Wild? But this game developed so much off the original that makes Breath of the Wild seem like just a tech demo. I will admit, the story is not the best on the list, but the open world is fine-tuned to the point where every little thing seems planned. They amazingly fixed most of the issues from the old game, but the issues that stayed were sadly amplified and were still there to annoy you. The introduction of the Skylands were a great implementation, however. But the main thing that wasn't very present in the marketing was the Deep Dark, in which they cloned the main open world, but completely inverted it to introduce massive amounts of challenge. I did not 100% the game, but I did beat all the shrines, get all the memories, and complete all the side quests and unlock all of the light routes, and I enjoyed every minute of it. Over my 100-hour playthrough, it was filled with fun, and the game never got stale. And I haven't even mentioned the amount of freedom you get with Zonai devices, which allow you to make full-scale machines. And seeing what people have built on the internet is absolutely mind-blowing as well. Along with the new abilities, I believe the possibilities are literally endless, and another 100 hours could easily be spent here. Cheers to Nintendo, who never fail to innovate and impress, and peace out to another year of gaming.